Hello, good day and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today we're going to look at Seventh-day Adventist core doctrine, which is the investigative judgment and the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. Now, to my viewers, I would implore you to look on Google and look at how this doctrine of the investigative judgment came into being in the first place by this man who goes by the name of William Miller. You can do your further studies on it, but I'm going to give you a short and concise info where that is concerned. Now, William Miller began to do some studies from the Bible in chronological order from Genesis onwards, and by the time he reached Daniel 8, specifically verse 14, which reads, "Unto 2,300 days then shall the sanctuary be cleansed," he interpreted the sanctuary spoken of there as to mean the earth, and the cleansing meaning to be cleansed by fire. Hence, second coming of Christ. Now we saw the 2,300 days spoken of in that same text to mean 2,300 literal years, right? He developed this analogy from Numbers chapter 14 verses 33 to 34, wherein God was punishing the children of Israel and told them that he's going to let them journey in the wilderness for 40 years. And that he's giving them each day for a year, even 40 years, according to the scriptures. So he began to calculate 2,300 years, counting from the time that that prophecy was written, which was 457 BC, and that led him to 1843 at first. So he began to preach, gather followers along with him, many of whom are coming from different Sunday churches, some who were never Christians. And at 1843 he came and went, nothing happened. Now 1844, now what happened is that someone told him that he got his calculations slightly off and that it should have rightly been October 22nd, 1844. That came and went and nothing happened. Now, from there, the movement, was basically, the movement was basically split up in that several of his followers went back to where they were coming from originally. Some went back to their Sunday churches, some became agnostics, some became atheists, right? Due to feelings of hurt and disillusionment, they became atheists, agnostics, and skeptics of everything that is religion. And I guess you can't blame them, right? Now, there are a few of his followers who would not have it so, who are still adamant and determined to figure out what went wrong. And these persons are O.R.L. Crozier, Hiram Edson, and Ellen G. White. O.R.L. Crozier developed a theory where the investigative judgment is concerned. In that, his theory suggests that what happened is that Christ went from the holy place to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary. Something they derive from Leviticus 16 and Hebrews chapter 9 and various other passages in the book of Hebrews. They developed that concept from those places. Now, Hiram Edson one day was in a cornfield and it was alleged that he received a vision seen Christ moved from one place to the next in the heavenly sanctuary. Right? Ellen White also said that she got that same vision. Right? And from there, she began to receive several visions, or so it is said, and got for herself a lifetime ministry as a prophetess to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Right? So there you have it. The Seventh-day Adventist Church from there, instead of admitting their error, William Miller's followers, instead, it's as though they gain an alibi for the mistake. So now, out of that aftermath, a doctrine was born that is called Investigative Judgement and the Cleansing of the Heavenly Sanctuary. For they said that Christ went into the most holy place at 1844 to begin a work of judgment and blotting out of sins, wherein he is screening the files of all those who are fallen asleep in him from the days of Adam till now, to see who among them are worthy of heaven, and of which he will soon reach to the judgment of the living. None of us know when that will happen, however. And once that happened, that he reached the judgment of the living, he's starting first with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because they are the ones who has light on it. Now he's going to invest both the dead and the living to see if their characters are 100% in line with the law of God and 100% reflects Christ. If it is found that this is not so, then they will be eternally lost. Right? So if you know the gospel, you should already pick up the serious problems from this doctrine. This doctrine personally gave me hell when I was a Seventh-day Adventist. It gave me terror, because each time I was wondering to myself, what if Christ draws from my file now? Will I make it? And the answer to that is no, because I have not reached the stage of perfection. Still haven't reached it yet either. So if this doctrine is true, I'm going to be lost. And not only me, every Christian in the world will be lost if this doctrine is true. Right? That's the first problem that we should realize. Now, it undermines the gospel of grace. Right? It very much undermines the gospel of grace. And I'll elaborate further in further videos. Now, what I'm gonna do is that I'm going to post a couple links, videos of former Adventists speaking on this investigative judgment concept in the description area, and I'll post a few quotes from from Ellen White, so that you can see what she has to say personally on the investigative judgment, right? And in my next video, I will address this concept from the Bible. Now, what I will do is that I'm going to read some stuff from two former Adventists who are no longer with us. Beginning with one who goes by the name of Dudley Mullen Canwright, who was one of the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who knew Ellen G. White and her husband quite well, who worked with them and even sat on their conference committee. He left Seventh-day Adventist Church somewhere between 1915 and onwards, somewhere after 1915 or so, and he wrote a book called Seventh-day Adventism Renounced. Now I'm going to read a few things that he noted in his book Seventh-day Adventism Renounced, page 77, wherein he reads William Miller's confession. And here is what it says. All the other Adventists long ago renounced the 1843 to 44 time setting as an error. Thus the majority of Adventists took the position that the time was an error of human judgment. Here Mr. Miller himself. On the passing of my published time, I frankly acknowledge my disappointment. We expected the personal coming of Christ at that time, and now to contend that we were not mistaken is dishonest. We should never be ashamed, frankly, to confess our errors. I have no confidence in any of the new theories that grew out of that movement, namely that Christ came as a bridegroom, that the door of mercy was closed, that there is no salvation for sinners, that the seventh-day trumpet then sounded, or that it was a fulfillment of prophecy in any sense. Conright goes on to say, from this we see, 1, that Miller, the founder and leader of that movement, owned that it was an error. 2, he repudiated the idea that it was a fulfillment of prophecy in any sense. 3, he especially points out the Seventh-day Advent position as utterly wrong. He knew all about their arguments on the 3 angel messages, the sanctuary, the Sabbath, etc. And yet he not only rejected them, but earnestly warned his people against them, so that very few of the original Adventists ever accepted them. Right? Thus, the father and founder of Adventism condemned and opposed the position which Seventh-day Adventists took with regard to his own work. He had sense enough to see and honesty enough to confess that it was a mistake, but they will not have it so. They know better than he himself. They will have it that it was a wonderful fulfillment of Revelation 14 verse 6 and 7. Miller denies it. Thus it will be seen that Seventh-day Adventists give an interpretation to Miller's work which he himself condemned. Not a leading man in Miller's work ever embraced the views of Seventh-day Adventists, but have always opposed them as fanatical and as a side issue. Right? Now, there are a few things that I want to point out in what Conright is saying here. Conright is saying that the father of the movement disagrees with the present teaching of Seventh-day Adventism right now. The father of the movement. He disagrees with the sanctuary teaching, investigative judgment and cleansing of the Adventist sanctuary. He disagrees with Sabbath. He disagrees with their 3 angel message. He disagrees with the bridegroom theory and the shut door theory, and that there is no salvation for sinners after the point of 1844. Now, I'm going to post some stuff on this as well, what Ellen White has to say on the bridegroom and the shut door doctrine. I'm going to post as much as I can post here for you guys to see. Now, through this one doctrine, Seventh-day Adventist gains its identity in that they derive the 3 angel message from Revelation 14. It is connected to this doctrine, wherein they believe in themselves that it is divinely appointed by God himself for them to go around and tell the world that they must keep the 10 commandments, specifically the 7th-day Sabbath, in order to avoid receiving the mark of the beast. Right? So they develop these theories from this one investigative judgment doctrine. And I'm going to read some further stuff that is said by D.M. Conright, where this teaching is concerned, where the sanctuary doctrine is concerned. He says, Seventh-day Adventists make everything turn upon their view of the sanctuary. It is vital with them. If they are wrong on this, their whole theory breaks down. As I've said to you before, it's a central pillar. Most, if not all, their other doctrines are connected to this doctrine. So if it cannot stand scripturally, then guess what's going to happen? All the other doctrines that are connected to it will stand in question and will naturally collapse with it as well. And you're going to see that for yourself in my further videos. Now Conright goes on to say a few other stuff. If this subject is as plain and as important as they say it is strange that nobody ever found it out before. And he is indeed correct. This doctrine is never ever thought in all history before. Not by none of our notable scholars theologians and reformers and Bible writers, no one has ever saw this doctrine before until Seventh-day Adventists came on the scene. Now, this is a red flag here, here for you guys, because many persons have it to say that this doctrine was a face-saving device, something that was concocted as a means of as a means to explain away the disappointment without having to acknowledge the error from the followers, that is, because as I read to you before, the father of it was honest enough to acknowledge it as an error, whereas his followers would not have it so, as Conwright made mention. Now, he goes on to say, not 1 in 50 of the original Adventists ever found out the real mistake they had made. Not even one of the leading Adventists like Miller, Imes, Litch, etc. ever accepted this sanctuary explanation. Only a mere handful of the great mass of 1844 Adventists found out the truth about the sanctuary, and these were men of no note in Miller's work. Miller himself opposed the Seventh-day Adventist movement, rejecting the idea of the sanctuary, the Sabbath, the third angel's message. What a hopeless tangle that Adventist work was. No wonder people rejected it. Right? So this is what Conwright has to say, which he recorded in his book. Now, going now to Desmond Ford, from his book on Daniel 8 verse 14. Now remember, you can get both of their books. Just go on Google and download it, and you can get it on PDF format. Now I'm going to read from Desmond Ford's book. For approximately on page 24, he says, for approximately 20 years, some leading Seventh-day Adventist scholars have contended that it is impossible to biblically prove our doctrine of the investigative judgment. For example, Raymond Cottrell and Dan Newfield. These have so affirmed in the presence of others, but many others have so believed without making public statements. This whole edition should be read most carefully by all who are concerned regarding the current sanctuary discussion. Alright, I'll skip that part. In 1958, a questionnaire on Daniel 8 verse 14 was sent to 27 of our top men in language and exegesis. All 27 replied that it was impossible to make a linguistic connection between Daniel 8 and Leviticus 16. They pointed out that cleansed was a faulty translation, and that justified or restored was more accurate, though quite unlinked with the Day of Atonement. He goes on to say, on the basis of this questionnaire, F.D. Nichol asked Ella Figure for a committee on problems in Daniel, a confidential committee which would not keep minutes. For 5 years the committee met and studied together, but without reaching agreement on the basic problems. Finally, Ella Figure declared it was not necessary to make a written report of the findings. To this day, the problems canvassed and posters taken by individual members remain confidential, except where those members have publicly expressed themselves. Few are aware that today most Adventist New Testament scholars admit that Hebrews 9 teaches Christ's entrance into the most holy place at his ascension. These scholars recognize that within the veil of Hebrews 6 verse 19 refers to the sanctuary apartment ministry, which according to Hebrews, Christ had already commenced. They further see that Hebrews 10, 19 to 20 clearly teaches that identical truth, and likewise Hebrews 9 verse 8 and 12 and 24 to verse 25. Both Old and New Testament scholars amongst us frequently confess that it is scripturally impossible to prove the year-day principle, and it is well known that Daniel 8 and 9 constitute a nest of unsolved exegetical problems. Right? Now I'm going to read. So I'm going to read one more statement. I'm going to read one more statement from Desmond Ford's book. Yes. Now in his book, Desmond Ford records the number of persons who have voiced their opinion and the investigative judgment, a number of persons who voiced the problems that they had with it. I'm not going to read all of it, I'm just going to read one of them for now, which comes from R.A. Cottrell. Now it says, in counsel with Elder Nicol, Elder Cottrell wrote 27 leading Adventist Bible teachers for their insights on the contemporary problems. All 27 replied, and many at considerable length, but the replies yielded no additional help, and according to Elder Cottrell, the replies demonstrated that we still had no satisfactory answer to criticisms of our position. For example, all 27 scholars admitted that there is no linguistic evidence for connecting Daniel 8 verse 14 with Leviticus 16. The majority also asserted that there is no contextual evidence in Daniel 8 for our doctrine of the investigative judgment. As mentioned earlier, Elder Nicol took the results of the inquiry to the President of the General Conference, with the result of the appointment of a select group for a highly confidential committee on the problems in the book of Daniel. Right? In order to make freedom of expression easier, no minutes were kept over the 5 years of meetings of this committee. 5 papers were considered, including 4. 45 papers were considered, including 4 by the present writer. No unanimity was reached on the problems considered. The proposed written conclusions for the benefit of the church was never prepared. Elder Figures said it would not be necessary even for the committee to make any sort of official summary of their work for presentation to the officers. This is the testimony of the committee members. Some members of the committee strongly affirm that it is quite impossible to legitimately deduce the denominational sanctuary teachings from Scripture, and that the answer to the dilemma was to view the inspired writings of Ellen G. White as the authority for interpretation of the biblical passages. So he's saying here that Ellen White was a means to correct this issue by placing her as an authority, as the authority for the interpretation of those biblical passages. These members believe that Ballinger, Fletcher, Conradi, Prescott, Grieve, and others have been correct in their reading of Hebrews 9. It is hardly possible to exaggerate the importance of this Daniel committee for the church today. With the new administration, the committee was not continued and has never been revived since. Now, what we see here is that they formed a committee to deal with the issues of this investigative judgment theory that is derived from Daniel 8 verse 14. And as you can see, it remains unresolved. They could not solve the problem. What happened instead is that all the persons who were a part of this committee confirm and acknowledge that this doctrine cannot be proven from Scripture. And what did they do to go about in solving this issue? Is to place Ellen White as an authority for the interpretation of the biblical passages, because they realized that without Ellen White, there is no way to prove that this investigative judgment from the Bible. I remember I stated in one of my videos where I shared my story. I believe it was in my second video, and how I mentioned that the moment I set Ellen White aside, I began to find serious amount of problems with the Seventh-day Adventist teachings. And this doctrine, this what Desmond Ford is saying, I can now understand why they had to place Ellen White as a means of authority. Because once you're studying the Bible through the lens of Ellen White, you will not see the errors. You will not see it. And if you do a study, if you do your history on Seventh-day Adventist fundamental beliefs, you can go on Google Play Store and download Ellen G. White writings. You are going to see two apps come up, a red one and a blue one. And I'm saying to you that you should select the blue one, and in the blue one, find the fundamental beliefs. You can find the fundamental beliefs there, and you can trace it. And you will realize that from 1955, that was when they began to say that Ellen White, the gift of prophecy, was being manifested in her life, right? And by the time of 1981, the church then took a stance by saying that Ellen White is a continuing authoritative source of scripture. They were never saying this before, you know, but because of the problems that occurred, through Desmond Ford and a few others, the church raised Ellen White to this status because they want persons to study the Bible through the lens of Ellen White, right? Because if they start to read the Bible alone, they are going to see the problems of the doctrines, and they don't want that. You understand? Because they want to keep the organization growing. More money, if you get what I'm saying. Now you can also download Seventh-day Adventist 28 Fundamental Beliefs from Google Play Store as well. And you will see in belief number 18, you will see where they say that Ellen White is a continuing authoritative source of doctrine, right? And you will see that what Desmond Ford here is saying is really true. If you are an Adventist watching this, do your research and you will see that something is definitely up here. And to my viewers, when you download the 28 fundamental beliefs, you can look at belief number 24 as well, that deal with this investigative judgment and cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary, this doctrine. So you can download both of those and search for yourself. Now, I remember now I'm going to post a few stuff on the description here. I'll post as many as I can post, right, on Ellen White's teachings on the investigative judgment, what she has to say on it personally. I'll post videos as well of former Adventists who had left, right, and you can see what they have to say. I'll post the YouTube videos in the description area. Now in my next video, I'm going to get down to Bible. I have read a number of stuff in order to get persons to think and to entice you, right, in order for you to want more. So now what I'm going to do now in my next video, I'll get down to Bible, right? So do look forward for my other video. Now I ask you kindly now to like, comment, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon so that you can get notifications whenever I make new uploads. Also, share this video with whom you know can benefit from it. And once again, thank you for listening. Bye bye now.